Welcome to LandO's Logic. It is the second week of the show, and I'll be honest, I didn't know if this week was going to happen. Just moments ago, my microphone decided to totally implode on me. I don't know what happened. I have, a stand for it. I have a Shure SM7B for any of you audio fans out there, and my microphone just decided to, all the little parts, the little trinkets and screws and all those things that go into it, it just decided to implode on itself. And I've had a few issues with this prior, so I was kind of familiar with it, but it had never really kind of fell apart the way that it did. So I wasn't for sure if the microphone was going to work. I wasn't for sure if the audio was going to be good or not. So this is kind of a quick trial run, kind of crossing my fingers that everything goes smoothly. At any point, the microphone very well could fall, hit my desk, land in my lap, and we'll just roll with the punches. We'll see what happens. But happy Monday, by the way. Happy Monday to everybody out there. A lovely week of Call of Duty news. A lot of stuff to talk about coming into today's episode as we are, we're on the road to the regular season is a good way to put it. We're not too far away. Obviously, the CDL regular season is currently TBA right now. No official dates, I believe, have been released. There's been a few people talking on January, February time. I mean, it's very broad, so no official dates as of yet. But the one date that I'm excited about is this evening. Browns versus Ravens. For those that know myself, they see me on social media, big Browns fan. Oh boy, this is a big game tonight. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I've been trying to watch everything that I can to kind of gear up for the game tonight. If you guys are sports fans, you watch football, basketball. I watched a lot of the offseason stuff for NBA as well. Feel free to drop it in the comments. Tweet at me at Lando on Twitter. Would love to kind of, enter into other discussions, because it's not really just Call of Duty that I watch. I mean, Call of Duty is without a doubt the esport that I watch, but I'm probably, I would say, just as much watching NBA and NFL at the same time. And I wish, I kind of wish that I had an outlet for that. And I wonder if this show, maybe another one, could turn into something primarily about sports. Is that something you'd be interested in? Feel free to let me know. But again, great episode last week. Had a really good time talking. Appreciate the support. And I want to bring up, I know in light of what I just said, it doesn't really kind of fit, but we're rolling with it. No episode next week. Traveling, Christmas time. Me and my wife are going to be visiting some family, so just keep that in mind. No episode next week. If you are wondering, if you're curious, if you don't see anything from me, that is the reason why. Hopefully, whenever we rejoin each other, there will be all kinds of wonderful things to discuss. But in light of that, let's go ahead and jump into our first subject. And that, of course, is that the LA Thieves have finalized their roster. Temp brought into the starting lineup as the team's fourth, and JCap announced as the team's coach. So again, in terms of a month ago, I think a lot of people were already on this idea that Temp was going to be the fourth of this roster. I know at one point there was a tweet that had came out from Temp where he said something along the lines of how he's going to be in the challengers scene this year and stuff. So I don't know exactly what happened with that. Maybe some miscommunication. Maybe it was the LA Thieves debating on possibly bringing in someone like Draza, who, by the way, I think has a huge opportunity to be that. I almost said sixth man because I'm thinking NBA, but and I know for COD it's kind of odd to say fifth man now because we transitioned from 5v5 to 4v4, but I think he has a really good potential to actually play a little bit this season, if not be involved in some capacity depending on how the team plays. So I think just in general for LA Thieves, it is going to be great to have someone like Draza on your bench, especially in the short term, what we got to see from him last year. With OGLA, and obviously he transfers with the Thieves into this next year. But in terms of Temp specifically, it's interesting because it's not surprising to me that we see this lineup have Temp as their fourth. But I wasn't for sure if Nate Shot and co were going to pull the trigger on this. And I want to bring out a few quotes that Temp had released. Yeah, I'm a big quote guy. I like to kind of see where the players' heads are at. I took a lot out of whenever Shotzi was announced by the Dallas Empire last season. He had a lot of really, really good quotes that kind of summarized the way that he felt about his position into last year. And I have a few of these quotes written down. The first one is, "I'm a great guy and I'll show it. I'm going to prove it." Next one, "I got dropped from the subliners. I didn't have any offers. I got blessed," basically. A lot of information there. There's a lot to take away from those two sentences. Well, technically 3 sentences, but you get the point. The first one, the first quote I'll say, is that he's fully aware of the outlook that not only the community has, the CDL community, but also the player community has on him as well. Because instantly, like, and you can go back and obviously feel free to watch the video, the announcement video, but it's kind of apparent that it's like, hey, you know what? I know I have a big personality, got a strong personality, I'm passionate. You know, we all know that. But I think him addressing it is good. Him kind of bringing this out, being aware, stating this off the rip, I think is good, not just for himself, but also for LA. I'm talking Thieves, obviously. Good for his team, good for the office, front office, you know, coaching staff, etc. It is good that this is already out in the open. Even guys like Dashi. You know, as soon as Hex announced that Dashi was going to be joining the Chicago, which obviously became Chicago Optic, he made it known that, hey, I had a conversation with Brandon, aka Dashi. I sat him down and I said, listen, this has to be different, right? Instantly initiating, like kind of getting the elephant out of the room, I think is a very, very good thing to start off with, because you don't want to have any of these random things that everyone's aware of. You have all these little things that everybody wants to say but is afraid to say. I think it's good that it's out in the open. I think it's good that he's already addressing something like this. The next quote, "I got dropped from the subliners. I didn't have any offers. I got blessed," basically. So fully aware of the situation, right? Fully aware of the fact that I got, you know, a great offer. I think he said this is the team that he wanted to be with, which essentially, you know, every player is going to say that. But I really think this is the team that Temp wanted to be with. Like I said, you got somebody like TJ, who's obviously been kind of a big role, big player in his history as they kind of came up together, has had a number of different opportunities to play with Slasher throughout his career. He's going to be a part of, you know, obviously one of the bigger brands in Call of Duty esports, kind of resurging back into Call of Duty, with 100 Thieves prior involvement, Nadeshot. You have guys like Mud Dog, obviously JCap on the team. There's a lot of big figureheads in Call of Duty that are going to be with this team. And so I think this is good for him to be a part of. And I think he realizes the magnitude of what he is a part of, really just in general. Another interesting thing, I didn't have any offers, right? Not one team offered Temp, at least at the time, anything during the offseason. And I hate to say it, but I kind of expected it, right? I kind of expected, after the season that he had with the subliners, he really wasn't the guy that everybody was talking about, because we were talking about pretty much everybody else but him. You know, I felt like kind of throughout the season, whenever the year kind of officially broke off, it was kind of this drama of like, you know, how is New York going to play? You know, Zero in the team just doesn't really seem to be meshing. Obviously, Zuma and Attach are always going to be big talking points. Accuracy kind of had some negative discussions throughout the year, whether or not he was kind of worthy of being a main AR. And then really the story throughout the remainder of the year was Mac, right? Mac gets brought into this team. You know, what a major influence that he has, a young star Rookie of the Year candidate without question, has a really good ending to the year, doesn't really have the champs that he wants to, but in general kind of reignites this team. And unfortunately, they finished top 8, I believe, when it came down to champs last. Yeah, they finished top 8 last year at champs, which is not ideal, but you kind of get it, right? I feel like every player was talked about, but Temp. Like the only thing that we kind of talked about with him was like a few of his quotes that he had about like Ramaza and all of these things, and how they were like the best Ramaza team. Don't play us on Ramaza anything. But that was kind of it. Like he was kind of more of like an extra rather than a star, which isn't really kind of typical for teams that Temp is a part of. And so I think that last year really kind of hurt him in terms of his stock, because if you look at like the prior years, you know, he was part of, you know, that Splice team. I mean, prior to that, he was part of like Echo Fox, Envy throughout World War II. And obviously he kind of makes his comeback, I believe, at the end of Infinite Warfare with like teams like Straight Rippin'. A lot of people forget Dashi and Temp on the same team, by the way. That was pretty crazy. So he's kind of been one of the primary players that you discuss on his last few teams that he's really been with, really ever since that he has been kind of focused back into Call of Duty ever since, he turned 18, joined back in the scene. He's kind of been one of the primary pieces. And with 5v5, he kind of got lost a little bit. He kind of got lost with the subliners. And so if he doesn't have a great year statistically, and he's kind of on the record continually known as this guy who, can be kind of a little outspoken, somebody who doesn't really mesh greatly when it comes into communication, those two things just don't mix, right? And if you are a franchise, your whole goal is to not have to worry about your team. The last thing, folks, that franchises want to deal with, especially with COVID going on, when there's a lot of uncertainty, the last thing they want to worry about is having to constantly make roster changes. I mean, that is such a stressor. It is such a stressor for them to have to be conscious of, because all they want is a team that's going to compete. They don't want to have to worry about anything. And obviously, if you have a change here and there, that's fine. And with players, contracts and how difficult trades were to make happen last year, this isn't what you want, right? You don't want to have a lot of things going on. So I wasn't shocked, like I said, to see that Temp didn't have offers, but it is telling, right? That a guy, at the beginning of Black Ops 4, there were 3 guys after the first event. It was clear who the top 3 in the game were, at least at the time, right? This is PreSimp, before he's even, turned the age of 18. After the first event, in which Optic wins, it was Dashy, Gunless, and Temp. 3 guys now who, in terms of kind of recency, either didn't have a great year last season, 2 of them didn't play at Champs, all 3 of them are regarded as having problems with their roster, but each of them got great opportunities this kind of next year. And I think all 3 of them are going to have a big spotlight on them because of how close that all 3 of them were to potentially not really having a solidified starting spot. Now, I think that Temp is probably a little bit more severe than the others. You could argue Gunless, depending on his position. I think that's also pretty high. And in terms of Dash, he obviously has a great skill level. A lot of teams would still pick him up. But again, a lot of bad press on these 3 players last season and really kind of in the most recent kind of year period. So I think that the possible challenger spot showed Temp that he has to change in some way. And again, it's noted, Slasher knows the skill that Temp has, right? They played under Denial in Advanced Warfare. That same team pretty much reunited exactly under Envy in World War II. Slasher specifically wanted Temp to be on the team. He's getting a great opportunity, and I hope for his sake that he seizes it. I think at times he can be misunderstood, but he has to adapt to the way that the CDL works. It is much more professional now, and I think it's only going to get more and more that way. A lot of the young guys coming up, they're mature, right? I mean, there's a lot of guys that we're talking about. I mean, you talk about the last 2 MVPs, both rookies, both known as being able to handle pressure, both known as being able, or rather kind of both are known to be kind of more mature. They show up to practice. They're willing to grind. Simp and Shotzi, right? Both of those guys. And I get, it's hard to call Shotzi a rookie because obviously the Halo experience, but in general, he was a rookie in terms of first full season playing COD at a high level and does what he does. Simp obviously has a huge history in COD, but a lot of these young guys coming up have kind of been around the scene for such a long time that they are already developing this area in which it's not really that difficult to work with them. It's honestly a lot of the veterans or a lot of the older guys, middle of the pack guys that are struggling with this kind of internal problem. So again, I think this is a big move for the Thieves. I mean, the talent that Temp possesses is fantastic. There's no doubting the talent that Temp has. It is just really a matter of, can he work with this team? Is this roster really going to be able to work, function properly? And I think a lot of that's going to be on his shoulders. And I think a lot of that is also going to be on the new coach's shoulders in JCap. He gets brought in, obviously part of OGLA last season, gets benched kind of throughout the year in the midst of the Dash EV Slasher saga that was known but yet not known at the same time. And I'll say this, JCap has kind of always been like a coach. I mean, ever really since he kind of got out of his prime, I would say like maybe after Black Ops 2 maybe, kind of instantly entered into more of a leadership role. And I said this before, he's kind of like a point guard, but in Call of Duty, right? He doesn't mind telling you what you did wrong. He's able to identify where certain players need to be on the map. He has a great history with Slasher. He's won a championship with him. world championship, I should say. They have a lot of respect for each other. And these two players I thought were perfect for OGLA last season. And had it not been for the, I don't know, misconception, and again, I never defend this, of Dashy and versus Slasher last season with OGLA. But I think if that doesn't happen, I mean, Slasher and JCap as your two leading veterans, and you got three young star talent players, I don't see how that doesn't work, right? That's the reason why I was so primed on calling this team one of the best, in the offseason, because it's like you got these two guys that won a world championship with each other. They are willing to work, hard workers. JCap's going to be unselfish. Slasher's going to be a beast. And you have these three guys, right? You have TJ and Dash, who come off an amazing year. Kenny's going to be great as always. How does this not work, right? So I think that JCap kind of being in a leadership position, I think is going to be excellent for them. I think that he will be on Temp's case if things start to go wrong. But I think the mixture, again, of Slasher and JCap working together is going to be interesting. But I think if there was one player that Slasher would kind of release or allow for somebody to step in and change things up, it would be JCap, just because of their history, because of, I think that these guys like to be alongside each other. I think they respect each other's game, the way that they approach it. So I think this was kind of a natural move for JCap. I always liked the guy. I think he's a great player, one of the greatest players that we've seen in Call of Duty history. And I think it's great that he kind of finally has the stars around him. He may not be playing, but I think his greatest skill is still going to be shown, which is that leadership, which is just the overall awareness of the way that the game ends up working. All right, so where does this team rank? That's a wonderful question, right? Where the super unnecessarily early power rankings. I think I'm going to come out eventually with a dedicated segment to kind of outline what I've seen so far in scrimmages. I mean, again, these calls, and there's going to be a lot of players who take things personally and say, "Oh, I cannot believe that you have us this low." I was actually looking at all 12 teams, and again, we don't have official lineups for each roster. I think is it just Legion? Let me actually check really quick. It might just be Legion only. Now that we've seen, essentially LA Thieves kind of announce things. Florida Mutineers finalized their team, which we'll talk about in a moment. Yeah, it's really just the Legion. So maybe I can't say next week, but here very soon, we're going to be having probably a very unnecessarily early power rankings where we kind of talk about each of the teams, kind of give an in general position of where they're at and kind of go from there. But I would definitely say the LA Thieves are most likely going to be in the more top echelon of things. If you're going to separate them into, top 6 versus bottom 6, I definitely have them in the top 6. Where do you have them at? I think at the moment, anywhere from like 3 to 6, I'm not against. I would probably have them higher than, I would say, like, I'll say this. I have them around like 3, 4, 5. Like somewhere in there, I think is good. It's hard because when you have 12 teams in the league, that's like, I just went through like 30% of where they possibly could reign. So it's hard, right? It's hard to kind of see where teams are, but I like this team's makeup. I think this is going to be a very smart team. And this is one set of scrimmages online. I don't even know if the LA Thieves are in Texas yet. I know they're supposed to be moving to Texas. I don't know if they're here yet. But I was watching them scrimmage against Chicago the other day, and I've watched Chicago quite a bit. They're one team that pretty much scrimmages every day, always streaming, and they had a really hard time with the Thieves in a way that I haven't seen them struggle previously. And the primary way that they struggled against the Thieves was strictly just in terms of spawns. LA Thieves was constantly giving them a hard time in terms of spawns. I mean, they were always being like kind of, I'll say this, LA Thieves in terms of like their thought process, it seemed as if they were a step above. And I thought that was pretty surprising because for the most part, Chicago kind of rolls over a lot of teams they face off against. They're kind of playing against a lot of different teams right now. I think the scrimmage before this, they were playing against London. Didn't really have a problem. Granted, Zero is actually in Europe, unlike the other 3 right now. So you got to obviously give them a ton of slack for that. But it definitely caught Chicago off guard. And I kept hearing Sender, pretty much come into the comms and be like, they're just kind of outthinking us. Like, they're constantly stealing time away from these money hills, and they're constantly breaking our setups. And it just seemed that LA Thieves were a step ahead in every way of Chicago and a lot of the hard points that I got to watch. Again, that is a very small sample size, and that should not be taken into serious consideration, but I think it is somewhat notable given the small sample size that we have, taking every single little thing into account. I like what I saw from them so far, and I think this is going to be a very smart team. It's just a matter of the slang mixing in with, I'll say this, it's a matter of them being able to connect both of the dots, which is smart also alongside skill. We know that they're smart, right? This is a very smart team. This team has a lot of good pieces, a lot of skilled pieces. But if we can see TJ and Temp be those SMGs that we know that they have been previously, I mean, you have 4 guys in every single position that can be a top 5, top 10 player per position. There's no question about that. So to know that is very terrifying for a lot of people. So again, I'm very excited to see what this team can provide. I think you have a really good kind of AR combo right now with Slasher and Kenny. Kenny's running the flex right now. And I think that last year, I think that Kenny and Slasher specifically learned a lot. I think that Kenny especially learned a ton. He was willing to kind of put aside his own, he essentially said that he gave Dashy the reins to the team. He said, you know what, you're going to be our star player. We're going to build around you. And it didn't happen that way. And so this is my thought on this team. Slasher is going to be Slasher without question, and at times he's going to take over games. But in terms of kind of the regular run and gun player who's going to be making a lot of different quick decisions, a lot more influential plays. Not that ARs can't do that, but it's different when you talk about SMGs or kind of more of a flex role. I think this is going to be Kenny's team. I think this is going to be a team that we're looking at and we're saying, okay, Slasher's leading in this stat, and then we have Kenny leading in this, and this. I think this is going to turn into Kenny's team. And I think that it needs to. I think that somebody needs to kind of the 3 outside of Slasher, somebody needs to step up. And I think that Kenny is ready to make that step. And we saw him do that, obviously, during champs. Has the lag out, not happy with that, and then turns into Texas Kenny kind of throughout the rest of champs. And he looked incredible. I mean, he looked absolutely fantastic. I forget the exact stats that were kind of changing up in terms of day 1 and 2 versus the rest of the event, but it was a solid like 0.2, 0.3, which in COD is absolutely insane. So I think this is going to be Kenny's team. I think you have a good group here. I think it's just a matter of the SMGs mixing. I think it's just a matter of a number of different players kind of getting on the same track. If they can do that, I think they're going to be in a very good position. I like the LA Thieves. Where do I rank them? Without a doubt, right now in the top 5. Where do you put them in terms of like, in my eyes, 3, 4, 5. I don't really know, at least as of yet. But we're going to be learning that as time goes on. And again, power rankings, possibly the unnecessary power rankings, unnecessarily early power rankings, maybe coming within the next few weeks. All right, not only did the LA Thieves make some noise, I probably called them 100 Thieves at some point. I knew that I was going to do that. I was trying to be aware of it. But I'm sure it happened. I just probably didn't know about it. So another team that obviously, like I said, made some noise during this past week was the Florida Mutineers. Officially announced that Slacked will be rounding off their team. And again, another move that was kind of expected. We had seen, Temp with the LA Thieves scrimmaging a ton. We saw Slacked pretty much, really for a very long time, pretty much since the game came out. He had been scrimmaging with the Florida Mutineers roster. But I will say, given the circumstances, and obviously, I think it doesn't have to be said, but obviously it needs to be said. It sucks because I'd love to see Pharaoh with this group. The late, great Pharaoh, it'd be awesome to have him on this team. But I think given what's obviously occurred, a horrible situation, but I think one that Florida Mutineers are going to try to represent him the best way that they can. I think given this team's makeup, given the situation, and at times the way that this roster, and I say the kind of the core 3 moving into next year, given the way that they work, I think that having somebody like Slacked is a step in the right direction. I think in 4s, you need somebody to kind of issue the troops where to go. And I think that's going to be really, really important for this team, because this is going to be outside of Havoc, right? You have Skies in his first official, really 4v4 game. You have Awakening, who's obviously was a rookie last season. So it's going to be kind of the same mixture for him. So this is going to be, for a majority of this group, it's going to be, and I know that Skies kind of played a lot during World War II, but I'm talking about at the highest level, when he's not playing on, I think it was the Earth Roots of the world, or the Three Kings of the world. I believe it was back in World War II, and I was casting over him. This is going to be really their first official 4v4 COD at the highest level. So I think having somebody like Slacked is going to be very, very useful to them. I think that Florida at times struggled with kind of the same thing that the Atlanta FaZe struggled with last season, which was not that they didn't have leadership, but it was the in-game decision-making, somebody to make the call, round 11 search and destroy, somebody steps up, somebody says, hey, this is what we're doing. The final moments last year of a domination game, the final hardpoint rotation of obviously a hardpoint game, somebody needs to be there to be the voice, to kind of give input, to kind of step up where the team is starting to slack a little bit, no pun intended. And I think that Slacked has more than enough history and more than enough merit for him to kind of be that for this group. And again, we know Florida Mutineers last season at one point looked like the best team. I mean, literally the best team. They had one of the best stretches at the entirety of last season. So there's no doubt that talent exists on this roster, especially when it comes down to the ARs of Skies and Awakening. So I think, again, you have some really good pieces here. I think this has the potential to become in some way Slack's team. And I think really the only question that I really don't have a question with the ARs. I think Skies is going to be great. And especially if this game does kind of become more fast paced, but with ARs kind of in hand. And again, the pace is still being decided. There's maps that could possibly be coming out. There's people talking about how, control should not be a mode and all these different things. So there's a lot still to be decided. A lot of metas still to be kind of finalized. But I will say, if this ends up becoming a fast game, I don't really mind that, despite a majority of the talent on this roster being ARs. Because again, Sky's a very fast, at times mobile AR. And I know there's a lot of people who are going to say, fast AR, did you see him did you see him in Domination last year? Skies can be a very, very good up-close AR, and Awakening is the definition of a flex player. Meaning that he can make an SMG look like an AR, and he can make an AR look like an SMG. And I say that in terms of the mobility of an AR and then the overall aiming ability of the SMG. He is excellent in that position. I think he's going to have an amazing season this year. Obviously, if a lot of it's online, we kind of know what to expect. So the big question with him is, can he do it on land? Can he, and this has been a question for everybody for the past 7 seasons, it seems like. But I think they're going to be great in terms of that position. I think Slacked, I think he fits in with this group nicely. I will say, I believe that a lot is going to fall on Havoc, though. He's really going to need to have a solid year. Again, you have some great ARs on this team, Skies and Awakening. We know roughly what Slack's going to give us. And whenever the Florida Mutineers went on that stretch, right, it was Pharaoh, it was Skies, it was Awakening, and the one piece that kind of put them over the edge in a lot of series, Route Man, right? It was Havoc. It was Havoc making the big plays. And then now obviously being in fours again, I think he has some really good potential to become something special with this group. I think a lot of this Florida Mutineers team is going to be kind of focused on him, because I think you kind of know what you're going to get. You're going to get another great year out of Awakening. You're going to have Skies be statistically one of the best ARs in the game, and you're going to have Slacked kind of be Slacked. So who does that leave in terms of the SMGs? It leaves Havoc to have to be the beast. And I will say, Havoc was pretty early on the 74U train. A lot of guys were using the MP5. And the first one that I saw kind of lead the train in terms of the 74U was Havoc. So I'm interested. And actually, too, I will say this. Early users of the Krig were actually the Florida Mutineers. I remember Chicago had some really early scrimmages, and they were using AKs and MP5s, and Florida was giving them a really hard time on a lot of the maps. And they were using Krigs and they were using 74U. So they were already ahead of the train in a lot of different aspects, and that could be very good for them moving forward. So again, I like this move for the Florida Mutineers. I think a lot of pressure does rely kind of on that SMG front line. You know what you're going to get from most of the guys, but a lot of it is going to come down to Havoc now that you have somebody like Slacked in the team. You know, I feel like last week we had a lot of our questions answered, right? It was like, you know, when are we going to see LA Thieves get announced? When are we going to see Florida Mutineers get announced? And what is going to happen with this Paris Legion roster? And as soon as I had uploaded last week's podcast, Intel Call of Duty, shout out to Crone, had kind of released the rumors surrounding the Paris Legion starting 4. And that starting 4 is going to be, of course, this is rumors, but it looks as if it's going to be Scraps, Aqua, Classic, and Fire. Okay. Pretty random. Pretty random. Again, I feel like if you had, you know, a group of free agents that were kind of on a page and you're like, okay, this one, and all right, let's go ahead and put my hand in the bag and we'll pull out, and it's Classic. I feel like you kind of grabbed a bunch of random pieces, but really it's not horrible. Now, I want to be careful when I say this. I'm not saying this is going to be a great team in the CDL. What I am saying is that given the rumors and given the players that have been thrown around and associated with the Legion, it's not as bad as I thought. It's not as great as I hoped, but it's not as bad as I thought. That's what I should say. But it is random. It is pretty random. I will say quickly, because there's going to be a lot of people who obviously know about the first 3. Fire is an excellent young player. He really kind of stormed onto the Challenger scene last year. He finished 3rd, I believe, at Challengers Finals. Played with like Noisy and Parasite. I think he had like the Canadian duo of like Exotic and Goon. So obviously he's played with veterans. I know that he's trusted by a lot of people. And obviously with you know, kind of the season that he had last year, it was kind of expected for somebody like him to get the call. So I'm glad that he's getting the opportunity. I always am excited to see rookies kind of pop into a season, especially to start the year off. We don't usually get that all the time. A lot of rookies usually kind of pop in the middle of the season or after the first few events. So if he does, in fact, become the starter for the Paris Legion, I am excited to see what this kid Fire can do, because I think that he's going to be electric. I think he can be a really good player for them, but it just kind of depends on the system that he's in. Now, in terms of the rest of the 3, not bad players by any means, right? I mean, Scraps and 4v4 can be a force. My big thing really for Scraps and for this entire team as a whole, we'll just go ahead and jump into it. Where's their head at right now? Because again, you have somebody like Scraps specifically, who everybody expected he and Wuskin, or Wuskin rather. I always say Wuskin, my apologies. Whenever I cast and I say Wuskin, everybody always comments about it. But I just don't know where his mind is right now, where the entire mind of the team is right now, because Scraps specifically, everyone thought that he and Wuskin were going to be a part of London moving into this season. It was like, okay, we're going to have these two, probably Dylan, maybe Shawnee, and then that was kind of it. And that was not the case at all. They get rid of the twins. A lot of it has been talked about in regards to practice. And that is really what worries me with this team, is not necessarily the skill, because you know what, at the end of the day, there are a lot of talented players in this league, right? You jump from 5v5 to 4v4, you have no expansion. Obviously the overall skill level of the players of the teams is going to be higher than it's ever been. I mean, last season we saw a number of different teams win championships. We saw a majority of teams even make it to the finals. So no doubt about it, we could very well have that same situation this year, if not even more than last season. So it'd be difficult to put together a team that you look at and you're like, what is that? So again, good pieces. My worry though is going to be the same thing with Gorillas last year, because this to me is Gorillas V2, right? You pick up some random players, guys who are talented, but some random players, and It's like some veterans, some good talent, a good young player, and then we see kind of how Gorilla's year kind of winds out, right? They end up making constant roster changes. They're trying to figure out the right team. They hardly win anything. They constantly get like last. But at the start of the season, there was some hype around them because you got like Aches on the team. Like I said, you have Decimate, you have Saints, and I mean a number of different really good pieces. Obviously, Aqua is one of those players. A lot of really good pieces. But in terms of the way that the roster formed, the way that they worked, it just never really happened. And so my worry with this team is just leadership. And apparently they're bringing in Theory as their coach. I don't know. I don't have any experience knowing what Theory is going to be like as a coach. Obviously has a ton of playing history. He's kind of been out of the scene for a little while. I know he's been playing, off and on a little bit, but just in terms of like hearing about him, there hasn't been a whole lot of discussion about Theory in recent years. But he was always a very unselfish player. And I know a lot of people kind of remember his kind of ending out of his career in World War II under TK. So again, it really kind of comes down in my eyes to where this team's head is at. Are they motivated? Are they just happy to be in the league? Do these guys want to play with one another? What's their relationship with management? What's their relationship with the Paris Legion staff? Do they want to have Theory as their coach? I don't know. And again, I think this is going to be the same situation as Gorilla's last year. I think you're going to have a good team with players who are very capable, maybe even at times have a good series here and there who maybe could, provide some surprises. But are they really going to rally around their current situation? Or is it just going to be like, hey, we're just going to be playing for next year. Like, hey, I'm on this team and we know that we're not going to be great because you look at some of the other rosters that are out there and it's just like, dear God, like this isn't going to be easy. What do you do? So again, I just don't know where to really rate this team. I think that they can probably make something happen, but just in general, it's a random group of guys, and I just don't know exactly how they're all going to mesh with one another. And I feel like if you're Legion right now, if you haven't signed these guys already, I would be looking at challengers. No hate toward Scraps, Aqua, Classic Fire. But I would be looking at challengers because there is this team of Gravity, Zaptius, Venom, and Paul X that are currently back-to-back NA Challengers Cup champions. And that is not easy, by the way. Given the current landscape, Challengers, by the way, has never been more difficult. We have a ton of very, very talented teams in Challengers this year. A lot of pros that are obviously entering into Challengers because we do change from 5v5 to 4v4. A lot of players getting spots, a lot of pro players getting spots and moving in. And in terms of this group together, this particular four, they are 6-0 in maps in the grand final. They've obviously won back-to-back, both Challenger Cups. And counting only quarters, semis, and finals in terms of maps, they're currently 18-2. Counting quarters, semis, and grand finals, they are 18-2. So I would look at these guys, and these guys aren't just, random players that you never heard of before. No, we've heard of Venom. We know Tom Gravity. We've seen Zaptius in the Pro League before, and Paul X has been this guy that I've known about since World War II and has constantly been one of the top players in the Challenger scene ever since it started. So again, you have some very well-known players in terms of the Challenger side. These aren't random players that you're worried about in terms of like, are they going to be good if they move forward? Yes, they are. They are. So I think if you are Paris, if you have not signed these players yet, watch. Because, I don't know, given the situations, but I guarantee that when it comes down to COD, and we'll kind of close it out with this, if Paris Legion has 4 spots available, let's say they have like 3 or 2 or 3 spots available, I guarantee you that one team is going to, if this roster keeps at the same pace, if they even like finish top 4 consistently, one of them is going to be grabbed, at least as a substitute. So if you want to combat that, if you are the Paris Legion, if you want to combat that, offer a majority of them the spot, right? If you haven't signed anybody yet, why not? These guys are going to sign for the minimum, especially if you can all get them at the same time, because that's what they want. I guarantee that most of these guys, they probably want to stick together. So if you can bring a majority of them over and say, listen, you're going to get the minimum, but you get the opportunity. You guys know the potential that you have together. Let's bring all of you guys over here. Sure, you'll play for the minimum, but think about the story. Think about what this is for your career. You don't have to worry about challengers anymore. You guys get to play together, right? If you just want to grab one of them, let's say you grab Paul X. Paul is not worried about, or rather, I'll say this: Paul is going to have to think about what team is he going to, how is he going to mesh. He's got to try to prove himself on a different team. Maybe he starts off as a bench player, but Paris Legion has the opportunity to offer this team, a majority of them, a roster spot, right? To give them a chance to play under the biggest spotlight. And I think if you do grab most of them, 3 of them, you can get them for probably a very good price, right? That's a low price. I mean, you can really get them for a good deal. So that's just where my head is. I think, again, if you want to go the route of grabbing, some of the veterans and fire, I think that's fine. You really can't go wrong in terms of getting a team that's going to have competent and good players. But in terms of having a real competitor, I think if you're Legion, you want a good story. I know they're not in the greatest financial situation right now. For those that watched last episode, we talked about the Paris Eternal. I mean, Paris Eternal had their best season in Overwatch League last year, and they had to dump the entire team, including the staff. And now, teams like the Dallas Fuel are just like, cool, these guys are up for grabs, we'll grab them. And so we saw the same thing with the Legion. They dropped the entire team. There was a little bit there. Maybe they hold on to 1 piece, 2 pieces moving into next season. They do not do that. And there's been a lot of talks about how they want to kind of go the cheaper route, grab guys for the minimum, and kind of move forward with that. So I just think if you are the Legion, you're not. I'll say this: you're not looking at a situation that can't be fixed. But I think if you are them, I think it'd be an awesome story if you just grab these 4 guys, or at least 3 out of the 4 guys, and you take your pick. I think you grab 3 out of the 4 of them, and you just move into next season and say, hey, we're the young group, and if we make a final, we're going to be one of the major stories of this year. Because if you think about it, as much as I like Scraps, Aqua, Classic, and Fire, if you grab this team who has been playing as well as they have in Challengers, 18-2 in quarters, semis, and finals, and the last 2 Challengers Cups combined, if you grab this team and they continue to play the way that they have in Challengers, and you give most of them the call, this is going to be one of the most talked about teams in the CDL, which is what you want. You want results, but you also want to be talked about, because that is how you sell sponsors. And I get a lot of these guys, they don't have social followings. But at the same time, would you rather be brandable, or would you rather have your winning and your placements brand you? And I think if you do get some of these young guys, and you know what if one of them really hits, right? Let's say that one of these guys is just, an unbelievable talent, competes for Rookie of the Year. Let's say that this team in general just kind of sits around like that top 6, top 4 position at times during events. That's a story. That's a player that is now brandable, right? I mean, and I'm not taking anything away from Shotzi by any means, but you think about what was known about Shotzi 2 seasons ago, or really just 1 season ago, for the moment that right before he got picked up by the Dallas Empire. I mean, you think about how brandable he is now. I mean, he is without question one of the most, if not the most untouchable piece in the entire CDL after 1 year. And obviously it's because he's part of the Dallas Empire, but it's also because of the stretch that he has, the season that he has. And obviously it's with the players that he plays alongside. He wins the World Championship, for God's sake. But just in general, the notoriety of 1 season can easily be changed, right? You talk about Gravity, Zaptius, Venom, Paul X. One of these 4 players can become something very special this year. And if you are the Paris Legion, you have missed twice already, right? You missed on Hydra, you missed on Mac. I think they might have missed on Civ as well prior. So that's obviously 3 strikes, but you get the point. Don't make the same mistake again. I think you give one of these guys a call. I think you see what's kind of up. You see what their price is. And I think that you really do give these guys a chance. I don't see the harm in doing it, because, again, the stats speak for themselves. The way that rookies changed the game last year was incredible. And so if you bring in, I believe outside of Zaptius, who has, kind of pro experience, you bring in 3 out of the 4 guys here. And I'm saying you bring in 4 players, but if you bring in 3 of them who are all rookies by definition, that's incredible, right? That's a story right there. So I think there's a lot of potential here. If you have not signed players yet, I think it's absolutely something to consider. But again, if you've already signed contracts, if things are already in play, which it sounds like they are, you're kind of stuck. But I think it's something to evaluate. I think it's something to be aware of. And I guarantee that if this 4 does not get picked up by the Legion, if this team is still roaming around, one of them is going to get a call within the next few months. One of them is going to get a call. I guarantee one player is going to be put on some sort of roster in some capacity. And I will say, if you do have a very special mix here, because it's hard in challengers. It is hard in challengers to keep a team moving forward. Even if they're seeing success, I guarantee this group of 4 probably will not be the same group of 4 at the end of the year, even if all of them stay in challengers. But if you have a really special group of 4 here and you have the ability to tap into that, I'd recommend that you do so. Oh boy, what an episode, right? A lot of discussions when it comes down to roster moves. What we talked about the LA Thieves, we talked about Florida Mutineers, we talked about the Paris Legion, where teams sit as of this moment, and the current really hot squad right now in the Challengers Cup, especially from the North American side. Obviously, when we talk about Europe, APAC, a lot of love deserves to go there, but just kind of given the worldwide circumstances at the moment, I think that, for most teams' financial states, NA is most likely going to be where a lot of that notoriety is going to be. But a great episode. Really, really enjoyed having this conversation today. If you enjoyed the episode, feel free to let me know that. Feel free to kind of message me in the comments if you have any discussions that you'd like to have me discuss. If you have any recommendations for the show, any critiques, feedback, anything of that nature, feel free to put it in the comments. Feel free to tweet at me at Lando. Really enjoyed having this conversation today. A lot of fun stuff happening in the CDL as we are kind of on the road to the regular season. Again, dates are tentative. No episode next week, but I guarantee that when we do come back, once it is a new year, once it is 2021 and we get out of all this mess, we're going to have a lot of fun stuff to talk about, really probably in just a short time before the CDL season begins. So a lot of fun discussions. Have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I'll be rooting on my Browns tonight. All right. See you guys later. Have a wonderful Monday.